Throughout history, execution has served not merely as punishment, but as public spectacle, political message, and psychological warfare. Some deaths were designed to match the crime, molten gold poured down the throat of a greedy Roman general. Others were calculated to destroy symbols, a religious leader trampled by horses to avoid spilling sacred blood. What follows are 9 deaths where execution became elaborate theater, each more horrifying than the last, each revealing something profound about the societies that orchestrated them. Molten gold, the Roman consul's final drink, 74 BCE, Asia Minor. Rome had sent consul Manius Aquilius to restore order in the eastern territories. He succeeded militarily, but made a fatal error of judgment. Aquilius encouraged the king of Bithynia to raid neighboring territories belonging to Mithridates VI of Pontus. This provocation sparked what historians call the First Mithridatic War. Mithridates responded with overwhelming force. His army of 100,000 soldiers easily crushed Aquilius's small force of 6,000 men. The Roman general fled to the island of Lesbos, hoping to escape by sea. But local fishermen, who despised Roman rule, recognized him hiding in a coastal village. They dragged him from his hiding place and delivered him bound to Mithridates. The king of Pontus harbored special hatred for Aquilius. He blamed the Roman for starting an unnecessary war, and for Rome's tendency to exploit the wealth of conquered territories. Mithridates ordered a public trial, where Aquilius was found guilty of war crimes against the people of Asia Minor. The punishment was as symbolic as it was excruciating. Servants held Aquilius in a seated position before the royal court. A metal funnel was forced between his teeth, pushing his jaw open to its breaking point. Nearby, a cauldron of gold coins melted into liquid metal that glowed bright yellow in the dimly lit chamber. Mithridates approached and spoke directly to Aquilius. "You Romans thirst for gold. Now you shall have your fill." The molten gold, heated to over 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit, was poured slowly into Aquilius's mouth. The liquid metal instantly seared his lips, tongue, and throat. It burned through the soft tissues of his mouth and esophagus, cauterizing blood vessels. The gold filled his throat, blocking his airway. He could neither breathe nor scream. The molten metal continued its path downward, scorching his internal organs. When it reached his stomach, the gold began to cool and solidify. Aquilius's eyes bulged in agony as his insides were literally cooked by the molten metal. The execution served Mithridates' purpose perfectly. A Roman general known for extracting wealth from conquered peoples had been killed by the very gold he coveted. If you value this kind of detailed historical examination that doesn't sanitize the brutal realities of ancient justice, please consider liking this video. The Martyr on the Gridiron, 258 CE, Rome. Emperor Valerian had launched systematic persecution of Christians. Lawrence was a deacon responsible for the church's treasury and charitable distributions. When Pope Sixtus II was captured and executed, Lawrence became the highest-ranking church official in Rome. Imperial officials summoned Lawrence and demanded he surrender all church treasures. They gave him 3 days to collect the wealth. Lawrence used this time to distribute the valuables among the poor of Rome. On the 3rd day, he presented himself to the prefect with a group of beggars, orphans, and disabled people, declaring, "These are the true treasures of the church." The prefect was enraged by this defiance. He ordered Lawrence stripped and bound to a large metal gridiron suspended over glowing coals. The punishment was deliberately designed to be slow. The distance between the coals and the metal was carefully measured to ensure Lawrence would not die quickly. but suffer maximum pain. Guards used long poles to lower the gridiron until it hovered just above the red-hot coals. The metal began to heat. At first, it felt warm against Lawrence's back and legs. Within minutes, the temperature became unbearable. His skin began to blister and adhere to the metal grate. The smell of burning flesh filled the chamber as Lawrence's back and legs cooked against the glowing metal. His fat melted and dripped into the coals below, creating small flames that licked back up toward his body. The pain was beyond comprehension as nerves were exposed and then destroyed by the heat. Yet Lawrence did not scream. After enduring this torment, for what witnesses described as an extraordinary length of time, he spoke with remarkable composure. "I'm well done on this side. Turn me over." The guards looked at each other in disbelief. Lawrence's flesh had begun to char black where it pressed against the metal. Smoke rose from his body as organs cooked within. His voice grew weaker as he spoke his last words, but his defiance remained absolute until death. Lawrence's execution failed to achieve its purpose. Instead of terrorizing Christians into submission, his courage inspired them. He was later canonized as Saint Lawrence, patron saint of the poor, the very people he had declared to be the Church's true treasure. Trampled without spilling blood, February 20th, 1258. Baghdad. Al-Mustasim, the last Abbasid caliph of Baghdad, faced a death engineered to satisfy Mongol spiritual beliefs. He had ruled for 16 years as the 37th caliph of a dynasty stretching back 5 centuries. Now he knelt before Hulagu, grandson of Genghis Khan, whose forces had just conquered the greatest city in the Islamic world after a 13-day siege. Baghdad had fallen completely. Its libraries burned, scholars slaughtered, buildings destroyed. The Tigris River ran black with the ink of countless manuscripts and red with the blood of its people. Historical accounts suggest between 200,000 and 1 million residents were killed. Hulagu faced a problem. Mongol custom forbade spilling royal blood on the earth, believing it would anger the spirits and bring misfortune. But the Khan was determined to eliminate the caliph. His solution was both practical and excruciating. Servants wrapped al-Mustasim in thick carpet rugs, rolling him up tightly until only his head remained visible. The 52-year-old religious leader was then carried outside the city to a flat plain. Contemporary accounts describe how the caliph wept and begged for mercy as he realized what was about to happen. Mongol horsemen assembled in formation. At Hulagu's signal, they urged their mounts forward. One by one, each rider guided his horse directly over the bundled caliph. The horse's hooves, each delivering hundreds of pounds of force with each impact, struck the carpet repeatedly. The rugs muffled his screams, but could not absorb the crushing force. With each passing horse, the caliph's internal organs ruptured. Ribs splintered, puncturing his lungs. His liver tore. Kidneys burst. Blood vessels in his brain hemorrhaged. Yet the carpet kept all fluids contained, technically satisfying the prohibition against spilling royal blood. Witnesses reported hearing the caliph's muffled screams grow weaker with each passing horse. The process continued for nearly 20 minutes. When the horsemen finally stopped, servants unwrapped the carpet. Al-Mustasim's body was grotesquely flattened, every bone broken, but not a drop of his blood had touched the earth. The 500-year Abbasid Caliphate ended in that moment. The Templars' curse, From the Flames, March 18, 1314. Paris, France. Jacques de Molay, the final Grand Master of the Knights Templar, faced his death by fire on a small island in the Seine River. The 70-year-old Templar leader had endured 7 years in French dungeons. King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the Templars, had orchestrated their downfall to erase what he owed and seize their vast wealth. These executions reveal how punishment was designed not just to kill, but to send messages about greed, defiance, royal status, and religious authority. What do you think these elaborate deaths tell us about the societies that created them? Share your thoughts in the comments. At sunset, de Molay was led to a purpose-built platform visible from both banks of the river. Crowds gathered to witness the spectacle. The king himself watched from Notre Dame Cathedral. De Molay had been forced to confess to heresy and obscene rituals under torture. But on this final day, knowing his fate was sealed, he recanted all confessions. Guards bound him to a large wooden stake using thick iron chains rather than rope. This deliberate choice ensured he could not collapse or move as the flames intensified. Bundles of green wood were stacked around him to shoulder height. Green wood was specifically selected because it burns slower and produces more smoke than dry wood. The executioner used a long torch to ignite the pyre from multiple points. The wood began to smolder before catching flame, creating dense, choking smoke that enveloped de Molay before flames reached his flesh. Witnesses reported seeing him cough violently as the acrid smoke filled his lungs. As the fire gained strength, it moved inward toward where he stood. His legs began to blister and blacken first. The heat was intense enough to cause the fat under his skin to boil before flames even touched him. Contemporary accounts describe how he remained standing, even as his lower extremities charred. The flames climbed higher, igniting his Templar tunic. His beard and hair caught fire while he was still conscious. Remarkably, despite unbearable agony, de Molay continued speaking. He called out a curse on both King Philip and Pope Clement V, summoning them to meet him at God's judgment throne within a year. In an extraordinary coincidence, both men would indeed die within that time frame. Pope Clement in April 1314, King Philip in November 1314. This coincidence gave birth to legends about the Templar curse that persisted for centuries. 3 days on the breaking wheel, September 16, 1581. Nuremberg, Holy Roman Empire. Authorities captured notorious bandit Peter Neers after a decade-long reign of terror across Central Europe. Under torture, Neers confessed to killing 544 people, including 24 unborn children cut from their mothers' wombs. The magistrates ordered a 3-day public execution designed to inflict maximum suffering while keeping the criminal alive to experience each phase. On the morning of the first day, Neers was stripped and secured to the breaking wheel in the town square. Unlike typical executions that lasted hours, his was meticulously planned to extend over 72 hours. The executioner began with heated pincers, systematically removing strips of flesh from Neers' arms and legs. The wounds were immediately cauterized with hot oil to prevent blood loss and extend his suffering. Witnesses reported that Neers remained conscious, his screams echoing through the marketplace as flesh was methodically removed from his body. On the second day, the breaking began in earnest. The executioner used an iron bar to strike Neers' limbs at precise points. Court records document exactly 42 blows. Each strike shattered bones, but avoided areas that would cause rapid death. The wheel was designed with gaps that allowed his limbs to bend unnaturally when struck, maximizing pain while keeping vital organs intact. By the third morning, Neers was still alive despite having most major bones broken and significant flesh removed. His breathing was labored, his body a grotesque patchwork of wounds. For the final phase, 4 horses were attached to his limbs, not for immediate quartering, but for slow, methodical pulling that gradually increased tension on his joints. The crowd watched in horrified fascination as his shoulders dislocated first, followed by his hips. The sound of tendons snapping was audible even above the noise of gathered spectators. Remarkably, medical observers noted that Niers remained conscious until his right arm separated completely from his torso. The massive blood loss finally caused his body to shut down. The remaining limbs were then fully separated and his head removed for display on the city gate. The emperor who drowned in a river, June 10, 1190, near Silifke, modern-day Turkey. Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa died in a remarkably mundane way while leading the Third Crusade. The 68-year-old ruler was one of medieval Europe's most powerful figures, having reigned for nearly 4 decades. His death would dramatically alter the course of the Crusade and European politics. The imperial army had been traveling through Anatolia, enduring scorching summer heat. They approached the Salif River, near the town of Silifke. After a long march in full armor under the blistering Mediterranean sun, Frederick was overheated and exhausted. Contemporary chronicles described the emperor as flushed and sweating profusely. Against the advice of his guards, Frederick decided to cool off in the river. Some accounts suggest he wanted to demonstrate his vigor to his troops by swimming across. Others claim he merely wanted to bathe. Regardless, the elderly emperor removed his heavy armor and waded into the water. The Salif was running high that summer, fed by melting snow from the Taurus Mountains. The water temperature was drastically colder than the air, likely below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The moment Frederick entered the frigid water, witnesses reported seeing him gasp from the shock. Medical experts now understand this as cold shock response, which causes involuntary gasping and hyperventilation. The emperor, already fatigued from the march, struggled against the surprisingly strong current. The cold water rapidly sapped his remaining strength. His body temperature plummeted dangerously within minutes. Frederick's guards watched in horror as he began thrashing in the water, unable to maintain his position against the flow. By the time his knights reached him, water had filled his lungs. They dragged his body to the shore and attempted to revive him by turning him onto his stomach to expel the water. Despite their efforts, the combination of cold shock, exhaustion, and drowning had proven fatal. The physicians who examined his body noted signs of hypothermia, blue-tinged lips, pale skin, in addition to water in the lungs. Most disturbing to the Crusaders was the undignified nature of their leader's death. The man who had faced countless battlefields perished not by enemy action, but by simple drowning. The mighty Barbarossa, scourge of Italy and the Pope's greatest rival, defeated by nothing more than cold water. The Erfurt latrine disaster, July 26, 1184. Erfurt, Holy Roman Empire. Approximately 60 of the Holy Roman Empire's most powerful nobles died in what became known as the Erfurter Latrinensturz, the Erfurt latrine collapse. King Henry VI had summoned high-ranking aristocrats to the Church of St. Peter in Erfurt for an important political assembly. The gathering included counts, dukes, bishops, and royal advisors, the elite of medieval German society. The meeting was held on the second floor of the church annex, a stone structure originally built to house visiting clergy. The room was not designed for such a large gathering. As discussions grew heated, more people crowded into the confined space. The wooden flooring, comprised of oak beams spanning the stone walls, began to creak under their combined weight. Directly beneath this meeting room was something unusual for a church building: a latrine pit. Rather than using the common system of chamber pots, this building featured an early form of indoor plumbing. The cesspit below collected human waste from a primitive toilet system used by church officials. Over decades, the pit had filled with decomposing excrement, creating a noxious pool approximately 12 feet deep. At approximately 2 in the afternoon, without warning, the overloaded floor gave way. The wooden beams splintered with a tremendous crack. 60 men in full court dress, heavy brocaded fabrics, chains of office, ceremonial daggers suddenly plunged through the collapsing floor into the cesspit below. The initial impact killed several instantly, as debris crushed their skulls and broke their necks. Most, however, found themselves alive, but submerged in liquefied human excrement. Their heavy clothing quickly absorbed the waste, making it impossible to swim or stay afloat. Those who survived the fall began drowning in feces. The narrow opening of the pit prevented easy escape. Many nobles became entangled with others in the confined space. The more they struggled, the deeper they sank. Some gasped for air, but only inhaled the noxious fumes and liquid waste. Witnesses described hearing screams that gradually diminished as the nobles suffocated in the putrid mass. By the time rescuers organized a response, all but a few had perished, drowned in excrement while wearing their finest court attire. Those who were pulled out alive later died from ingesting the toxic waste. King Henry VI himself had been in the room, but survived by standing near a stone wall that didn't collapse. His miraculous survival was attributed to divine protection, but it came at the cost of losing most of his advisory council in one of history's most undignified mass deaths. The theater of execution. These 9 deaths span over 1,500 years and stretch from Rome to Mongolia, from France to Constantinople. Yet they share common characteristics: elaborate planning, symbolic messaging, and the transformation of execution into public spectacle. Manius Aquilius was killed with molten gold to symbolize Roman greed. St. Lawrence was roasted on a gridiron, but defied his executioners with humor. Al-Mustasim was trampled to death without spilling blood to satisfy Mongol religious customs. Jacques de Molay cursed his executioners from the flames. Peter Neers endured 3 days on the breaking wheel for crimes that shocked even hardened medieval sensibilities. Frederick Barbarossa drowned in a river in an undignified end that contrasted sharply with his legendary status. 60 German nobles drowned in a latrine in perhaps history's most absurd mass death. Vlad the Impaler was beheaded, and his head impaled on a stake. Poetic justice for a man who had impaled thousands. These deaths reveal several truths about pre-modern justice. Execution was rarely private or quick. It was designed to communicate messages about the price of greed, the consequences of defiance, the power of rulers, the sanctity of religious authority. The elaborate nature of these deaths also reveals something darker: the human capacity to inflict suffering as public entertainment. Crowds gathered to watch these executions not out of civic duty, but fascination with spectacle. Execution became theater, with the condemned as involuntary performers in dramas scripted by their executioners. Modern sensibilities recoil from this brutality, yet it dominated human justice systems for millennia. Public execution wasn't abolished in most Western nations until the 19th and 20th centuries. The guillotine, considered humane in its time, was used in France until 1977. These historical executions remind us how recently, in the scope of human history, Justice has been separated from spectacle, punishment from torture, death from deliberate, prolonged suffering. If this examination of historical execution as political theater and public spectacle provoked thought, please like this video, share your reflections in the comments, and subscribe for more historical documentaries that confront difficult truths about humanity's past. Thank you for watching.